Bun venit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Ziua se apropie. În minutele care urmează vă prezentăm al treilea raport european de la Bruxelles din anul 2024 din seria de rapoarte lunare de acest fel. În ediția de astăzi, prezentatorul Tomas Sandell și invitații săi Jorg Meuthen, europarlamentar independent, și Christopher Herrmann, istoric și politolog, discută despre viitoarele alegeri europarlamentare, în special despre modul în care acestea vor decurge în Germania pentru alegerea reprezentanților în Parlamentul European.
On the 22nd of March in 2012, the first edition of the European report was recorded here in the Voxbox studio in the European Parliament in Brussels. This month will mark 12 years since that first recording, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is the 100th edition of the European report. In this anniversary program, we are going to focus on the European elections, which are coming up just 3 months from now, from the 6th to the 9th of June. And we will take a closer look at Germany, the largest EU member state. With me in the studio today, I have independent member of European Parliament, Jorg Meuthen, welcome. And his chief of staff, historian, political scientist, Christopher Herrmann. Welcome also to you. So, Mr. Meuthen, in preparation for the EU elections, which will take place in just 3 months from now, we already last year commissioned a survey research to find out which parties and which members of the European Parliament are, let's say, most pro-Israel. And maybe not to your surprise, but you took the #1 spot. And many of us, of course, are curious to learn how can this be and what made you become such a strong supporter of the state of Israel and the Jewish people?
Well, let me be honest. I really was wondering about this kind of result, that I'm the most pro-Israel MEP, because for me, myself, it's quite natural to be pro-Israel. It's the only stable democracy, liberal democracy we have in the Near East, and I always had my whole life a lot of admiration for this country. So for me, it's quite natural. I was more wondering that others vote in another way. And what I realized, and what in the very beginning, I was surprised that it are the leftists who are voting, in fact, against Israel, who have, if you take a closer look, have anti-Semitic positions. And that was something what was not clear for me before coming here, but it's quite clear. If you see the voting results, it's the left wing of the parliament who is a strongly opponent to Israel. And that is what I'm wondering about, because the situation for me is quite clear. Israel is a wonderful country, and maybe it's because I'm a German and I really feel a responsibility for the Israel state. That's in our nature after the events of the last century. It's quite clear. So I'm not wondering about my own votings. I'm wondering about the other votings, because I have no explanation for that. For example, if you see what's going on now after the 7th of October last year, and there are leftists in the parliament, they are really calling a genocide of Israel against the Palestinians. That's just the opposite of the truth. And that's what I'm wondering about.
Maybe we could summarize also for our viewers the findings in this survey, which in a way gave ranking to individual EU member states, to political parties, and where we saw a clear divide, let's say, between Western Europe and Central and Eastern Europe. There were 3 countries that came out very negatively against Israel, and that's in particular Ireland, Luxembourg at the time, and Spain.
Yeah.
whereas countries like Poland, perhaps even surprisingly, came up very high as number one. But as you say, Mr. Meuthen, then there was also this center-right and left divide. And if you want to define what would be considered the most negative forces in the European Parliament, it would be the extreme left in a country like Spain. So these are just scientific numbers in a way, and also to announce to the viewers that we will do a new survey ahead of the elections, and that will be interesting to see what the results will be. But coming over to you, Christopher Herrmann, you've been with Mr. Meuthen these last 5 years, and apart from being an expert in EU relations, you are also very well versed in German politics. So in just a few months, Germany will go to the polls and elect, I think it's 95 members to this European
96,
Parliament.
Yeah.
96 even, out of 705 members, which is a significant amount. What do we know at the moment? What can we expect in the upcoming elections? How will the Germans vote this time?
That's actually a very good question, because predictions were always pretty easy in Germany. Germany used to have a very stable political party system, low volatility. People have been bound permanently to single parties. We just had actually 4 or 5 parties which were there and existed. And currently everything changes. So the development we experience in other countries in Europe, new parties are coming, suddenly successful, people change their mind, people vote different parties. That comes to Germany now later than other countries, but I would say even more intensive. Because after the political system in Germany haven't changed since World War II, more or less. It was the same parties, the same, more or less the same electoral results. Now in the last few years, and especially in the last month, I have to say, suddenly there are a couple of new parties on the left, on the right, which are suddenly in the polls somehow successful. And so it's not that easy anymore. And concerning the electoral result, I have to say we see some crisis in Germany currently. I used to say the UK had a winter of discontent in the 70s. Now it's the German winter of discontent. So we have something we didn't actually experience in Germany for decades. We have protests everywhere, farmers, leftists against right, permanent strikes. Now the railways are on strike, different other businesses are on strike. So the people feel some real serious disappointment. And it's also what you can read in the media, and everyone is wondering why. But for the European election, that means that the political landscape in Germany will change. And so also the results here for the European election will be different. I can say that the EPP will be still the strongest force in Germany. But behind this, all established parties will lose. So the Social Democrats will crash down. So that's actually what we can expect. The Liberals, which had a very clear pro-Israel stance always, will lose a lot of seats, and there will be new parties, like a newly founded party of Mrs. Wagenknecht, a left-wing nationalist. She left the Left Party to form a party combining a socialist agenda and economic issues together with a conservative national agenda in social issues. And she will make somehow 9-10 seats, something like this here in this election. And she has a clear anti-Israel stance. On the other side, there's the AfD, which became more and more extreme, which used to be pro-Israel years ago, but now actually is pretty critical towards Israel. And they will also win a lot of further seats. And then we have something pretty interesting, but also actually pretty dangerous. It could be that for the first time, the Islamist party in the European Parliament, coming from Germany. So they have just been founded a party of Turkish migrants, which is obviously totally controlled and financed by the government in Ankara, which follows a real Islamist, not only conservative Islamist agenda, also against Israel, which is in the polls about 3-4%. So they will have some seats here as well.
Is it so, correct me if I'm wrong, that in the German elections to the European Parliament, there is the threshold is lower?
The threshold, yes.
Is it 1%, 1.5?
Even less. So basically, there's no legal threshold. So it's just an arithmetic thing. So it's about 0.7% if you calculate with 96 seats. And so it's normally small parties don't have any chance in Germany, not on the state elections, not in the federal elections, but in these European elections, it can be that a lot of unknown small parties somehow make it to get at least 1 or 2 seats here in the parliament.
I understood from the last elections that there was a popular comedian who had,
for example,
he was just making jokes of everything, but he got elected into the European Parliament.
We re-elected now for the 3rd time already because there's no threshold. And
that's right.
So that's, for example, something like this. Yeah.
We can expect to see some interesting German characters in the next 5 years.
At least interesting, yeah.
Interesting, yes. Let's. You mentioned Alternative for Deutschland, and it was mentioned already that in the survey we saw that there is currently a center-right left divide when it comes to how we look at Israel in particular, but obviously also anti-Semitism today can be seen both in the extreme left and the extreme right, and sometimes they even tend to merge in a way which is very interesting. Mr. Meuthen, you were once the co-leader of a party which may not be known to everyone who are not German citizens, Alternative for Germany, Alternative für Deutschland, which you have, yes, right-wing, some would consider it extreme right-wing. You have since left the party. And I think this raises the same questions as Mr. Herrmann mentioned, that there is quite a chaotic scene in Germany. The Germany that we as non-Germans would always like to see, that the stable force within the EU, the paymaster that would always come to our rescue if someone needed to be bailed out. But as I understand it now, Germany is not necessarily the same Germany as we have been used to. What has happened, and can you elaborate on your own political journey and why you left Alternative for Germany?
Well, maybe I can begin with the last point. Yeah. You know, for me, it's acceptable to be right-wing if you understand right-wing as conservative liberal positions, strictly against any kind of socialism. That's where I come from. That's what I think. That's my strong conviction. But according to my mind, it's not acceptable if you are extreme right-wing, because if you become extreme right-wing, you, for example, you go into a direction where anti-Semitic positions are accepted. And for me, it was always, from the very beginning to be in this party, my clear position: I do not collaborate or work together with any kind of anti-Semitic people. In the first group I had in a regional parliament in Germany, it was in 2016, there was a guy, Wolfgang Gedeon. He wrote a lot of books, and these books were strictly against Jews, was anti-Semitic in a very, very bad way. And I said, well, he must go out or I leave. And it was a hard and long fight to get him out of the party. It took about 4 years to get him out of the party. Today, we have an AfD which is accepting people like this in the party. There are no borders to the extreme right wing, and that's not acceptable for me, never. And so finally I took the consequences after being more than 6 years the president of the party to leave the party, because I could no longer stay there. If I must be able to look in the mirror in the morning when I stand up, to look into my own face, and I can't do this if I were in a party where anti-Semitic positions are accepted, and they are today. For example, after the 7th of October, what were the reactions of the political parties? You know what the reaction of AfD was? None. In the first days, they didn't say anything. They didn't find any word for this cruel massacre. Not a word. And that's not acceptable at all. So I cannot work with extremist people, and that's why I left the party, for sure. And concerning the situation in Germany, because you mentioned it in your question, I think Christoph is completely right with everything he said. We are in a complete change in Germany, and we don't know where the journey is going to. Because we have new parties and we have new developments. I think the reason where does it come from? Mostly it comes from the really hard migration crisis we have. It's too much for the people if you have such a large number of migration, and even of illegal immigration. So something's coming into disorder, and people becoming nervous about that, and many people become radicalized.
I think it's one of the factors. So I think there's one step to make even the middle class more radical, more accepting, more willing to vote for populist or even extremist parties. I think it is also the Corona crisis and the management, how the German government did it. It was not a good point. It was in the beginning too less, in the end definitely too much. No real strict line, but then that's another issue. But that really made many middle-class people, if I may say so, more radical. And the third thing is also the influence of green ideas in the last governments, which actually now really touch the everyday life of the people, affect the everyday life of the people, and that also produces actually some kind of reaction, because the people think the government tries to influence our everyday life, like driving our car, what to eat, and so on. That's actually something we also experience in other countries, but in Germany I think it's more intensive now.
I'll come back to you with question to elaborate on this issue, but maybe just as a side note, mention the radicalization where we have Madame Le Pen refusing to work together with AfD, because according to Le Pen, who is not the most moderate of political leaders in Europe, according to Le Pen, AfD are too radical.
That's it.
So that should say something. But Coming back to Germany again, and as friends of Israel in the European Union, we would always count on Germany as being this last bastion in a way against the EU coming full scale against Israel. And we know the famous quote also from Angela Merkel to say that the raison d'être, the reason for existence for the Federal Republic of Germany, one of the reasons is really to support and stand with Israel. But let's ask this question: is this still the case? And when it comes to anti-Semitism, is there anti-Semitism in Germany, and where does it come from?
Yeah, so first of all, about Israel, it's actually good news that I would basically say Germany is still a strong partner of Israel. And we can see that currently in the current crisis, compared to other European countries, I think the German government is doing something for Israel. Compared to the absolutely disgraceful positions of France or even Belgium, where politicians discuss sanctions against Israel, for example, something like this doesn't exist in Germany. So there's, at least in the more or less center of the political sphere in Germany, there's a broad consensus on supporting Israel, except the extremes on the left and on the right, of course, but even if I look onto the Greens or the Social Democrats in Germany, compared to other European Social Democrats and Greens, they are pro-Israel, at least the majority of these parties. And of course, we can see that actually Germany could do more. I think about the resolutions in the last years and in the last month, especially in the UN General Assembly, where Germany just abstained, at least I can say on the one hand, but also just abstained instead of sent a clear sign of voting against it, like, for example, Austria did it, or the Czech Republic, who actually, I think now, after 7th October, are even more active in actively support Israel. But basically, I have to say, Israel still can count on Germany so far. About anti-Semitism, yeah, it exists. And unfortunately, as in other Western countries, we see currently some revival, actually, after the events of October. And I have to say, there is still, as you mentioned, Mr. Gideon, there is still this old school right-wing anti-Semitism. It's dangerous, but I would say it's just a side issue. We experience currently a serious wave of violent attacks on Jewish institutions and on Jews in Germany, especially in Berlin as a capital. And it must be said clearly, it's coming from Muslim migrants, most of all. So there is a several problem with Islamic motivated anti-Semitism in Germany, as in other countries. But we can see that Jewish students are beaten almost to death in Berlin because they have some pro-Israel statements. We can see that the Star of David is smeared as graffiti on Jewish apartments in Berlin. Something like this. There's a lot of more. And there I really have to say that the political class in Germany and also the civil society, who actually used to talk about its historic responsibility after World War II and the Shoah, and always said never again as some kind of mantra, it actually failed, because now Jews are living in fear, especially in Berlin, for example. And of course, this Muslim anti-Semitism is promoted somehow by some left-wing anti-Semitism, which we also can experience in Germany. There was now the Berlin Film Festival, the Berlinale, where some so-called pro-Palestinian activists read some propaganda, and the guests in the audience applauded.
Even politicians there.
Yeah, even
were
politicians.
clapping in their hands.
Yeah. So
on this subject.
Yeah.
And further.
Can't believe it.
So, and further, the media as well. So, if you look especially at the public broadcasters in Germany, they still demonize Israel. It's about the child murdering Israel. They say they send every day images from Gaza of suffering civilians, but they didn't show the images from Israel from 7th October. And this is still the same message we used to have. It's the Jews who kill innocent children. Yeah.
If I may interject and quote actually Bernard-Henri Lévy, who spoke a number of years ago, and he compared anti-Semitism with the 30s and now, and he said the difference is that today, by and large, the political class and looking at Europe, take a strong stand against anti-Semitism. There may be lapses of clapping and then having to apologize the next day. But he would always, there was a senior MEP, Elmar Brok, who all of you would recognize, who said that to us that we have to think about the people on the street, because the political class, in Germany in particular, I think it's very clear. But now you have this growing anti-Semitism on the street from the extreme left, from the extreme right, and from the Islamist communities. So that makes the equation quite challenging. But with a few minutes left, I want to ask one question to you, Mr. Meuthen, and another one to you, Mr. Herrmann. You have been here now, our best friend, for 5 years.
Hope so.
And what would be your message to the European, or to the members of the European Parliament these next 5 years? How can the EU become more supportive of the Jewish people in Europe and the State of Israel?
Well, I think it's necessary that it's not only a support by words, which can be empty words. If you say never again, They all say never again. They clap into their hands. In the next moment, they say, we are against a genocide in Gaza. And they clap, the same people are clapping in their hands. That's not enough. Yeah. You must have a clear and strong position supporting Israel in the Near East, but as well here. Right. What Christopher mentioned, what is going on in our country. So I'm not so sure if it's really true that Israel can count on Germany, if I see what's going on in my country. I'm quite critical in that. And we have anti-Semitism from the Muslim community, which grows and grows and grows. We have it on the left wing, we have it on the extreme right wing, and we even have it, that was not mentioned yet, in the universities. So that's what is a horror for me. Young people, students, take these pro-Palestinian positions without reflecting what is really going on. And these people are those who will come into some jobs later. They will have some importance. If they develop positions like that, I'm afraid of the future.
Yes, I'm sorry to have to stop such an interesting discussion. We could go on for another half an hour. We may do so in a webinar, actually, in the near future with Mr. Herrmann. But what I want to mention, I want to thank you already now, not only for participating, but also for hosting a pro-Israel youth summit here in the European Parliament in April. And we are so grateful for your legacy in a way to pay this high price to stand up.
It's an honor for us.
And it's an absolute honor for all of us in the ECI family. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the 100th edition of the European Report, here from the heart of the European Parliament in Brussels. We will come back again next month with a new edition. In the meantime, do remember to get acquainted with the candidates for the upcoming EU elections, and we will see you again next month here in the European Parliament. Thank you.
Emisiunea Ziua se apropie, se încheie aici. Vă mulțumim pentru atenție și vă dăm o nouă întâlnire săptămâna viitoare la aceeași oră. Sunt Codruța Burghelea, vă spun la revedere și Dumnezeu să vă binecuvânteze!